Hello, guys, and welcome back to Heart to Heart with Hads. This episode, I'm going to be covering all things PCOS and kind of like the functional approach to PCOS. So let's just dive in. We're going to talk about the different types of PCOS. We're going to talk about supplements to take. We're going to talk about the symptoms associated with the different types of PCOS and just deep diving in some cues, some labs to run, and all the things you can do to help get your PCOS regulated, because I do think it is something that you can manage symptoms and almost heal from the root. And also just unpacking some myths about PCOS. The first one being that if you have PCOS, you can't get pregnant, and that is not true at all. If you can support ovulation, which you can, if you can support ovulation and have and ovulate, then you can get pregnant. All you need for getting pregnant is ovulation and then a progesterone rise and obviously implantation. So, we're going to dive deep into that. And then also another myth is that you can't lose weight with PCOS and you have chronic insulin issues. And again, you can resolve these issues. So, we are going to just dive right in. So, first thing to know about PCOS is it does cause chronic anovulation, meaning no ovulation. And if there's no ovulation, there's no progesterone, and then your endometrium tissue is at risk. So, another thing that it does is it suppresses your sex hormone binding globulin, which increases the free testosterone, which that's how some women with PCOS have more acne. So, there are four functional PCOS kind of types. First one being insulin resistant. So this you can see with this weight gain, fatigue, cravings. Second one being post pill PCOS. This is when androgen, so testosterone is high, DHEA is really high, SHBG is low, the sex hormone binding globulin, like I said, when that's low, free testosterone tends to be higher. This is where you have the acne, the hair loss. This can happen a lot post oral contraceptives. So, different types of oral contraceptives, hormonal birth control can cause SHBG to go down, which brings androgens up. So, post pill PCOS is what we're talking about with that one. And then inflammatory PCOS. So, this is where your immune system gets activated. You have some GI and liver issues. Maybe you have high CRP on your labs, C reactive protein, and then a lot of GI issues, like I said. So, pain, heavy periods as well. And then the fourth one is adrenal PCOS. And so, this is when your HPA axis is dysregulated. You have super high DHEAS, your testosterone a little bit normal, maybe you're a little bit more on the leaner side, you're not overweight, and you have some anxiety, insomnia going on. So just because you have PCOS does not always mean that you are going to be overweight, carry fat in the midsection. There's four different types, like I said, and so knowing which one best kind of suits you can help you tailor your own lifestyle changes to that. So we're going to dive deep into what you can do to help with each of these. But the first thing that I want to say in PCOS is that you need to support estrogen detox, because typically you're going to have some estrogen dominance going on. Since you're not ovulating, your progesterone is going to be fairly low. And so you are going to have more estrogen in relation to progesterone. So to support estrogen dominance, eating a lot of cruciferous vegetables, so broccoli, Brussels sprouts, kale, things that are going to help, things that are higher in um, DIM to help detox more. And then also good supplements to help with that is myo-inositol, magnesium glycinate, omega-3, and chasteberry. And then calcium D-glucarate is also a good one, but also just taking your methylated B12, vitamin, folate, B6. So one of my favorite supplements actually for hormonal support is magnesium, zinc, and B6. There's a good supplement that combines all of these on Amazon. I don't remember what it's called, but I have it maybe like every day, or well, it's like blue and white and black. I recommend that to all my clients. Doesn't matter what they're going through, whatever. I think that it supports hormones in all facets. So another thing too with PCOS is you want to address any underlying gut issues. So a lot of people with PCOS get diagnosed with IBS, which IBS we know is just a blanket statement or diagnosis for something underlying going on. And so highly recommend a GI map, or like if you have SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, that can cause a lot of issues, which can make you constipated. Then you're not excreting, getting out that excess estrogen. And so it's just building up inside of your body, causing all of these hormonal symptoms, the heavy period, the painful, swollen breast, the constipation, pooping like a rabbit, all the things. So GI map is definitely something if you do suspect that your PCOS is has a little bit of gut related. And as I'm going through these, you might be like, I think I have all of these. I think I have insulin resistant. I think I have post pill. I think I have inflammatory. And that may be true. And so it's kind of just like designing and figuring out what you need to do for your specific phenotype. And so this is why it's really important to actually have a coach that can help you with this. And I'm not just saying that just because that's what I do, but like you don't just want to be guessworking around everything. So let's see here. I'm just getting into my notes that I just want to talk about. But I wanted to compare the like conventional definition of PCOS, which PCOS is polycystic ovarian syndrome. So conventional definition versus the functional consideration. So conventional definition is must meet two of these three. So anovulation, clinical or biochemical hyperandrogenism, which is testosterone being elevated, and then PCOS morphology. So like if they go in and they can see inside your ovaries and see that you have less than 12 follicles, or your ovarian volume is greater than 10 ml. So those are like, that's a conventional definition. Now the functional consideration is the one that I had just kind of talked about, and the functional consideration accounts more for metabolic drivers. So a lot of PCOS clients are misdiagnosed due to the oversimplified diagnostics, like I mentioned, the conventional definition. So functional PCOS takes a look at your endocrine system, metabolic, inflammatory, GI, and environmental dysregulation. So, excuse me. So endocrine wise, if your LH is high, your LH FSH ratio is high, this could mean androgen excess. And then if you have insulin resistance, this leads to hyperinsulinemia, androgens increased, like I talked about, free testosterone high, and then your sex hormone binding globulin low. And then obviously reproductive wise, it affects you because you're not ovulating, the low progesterone, and then too much estrogen related to that, which when you don't have progesterone, this causes low grade inflammation. So this can worsen your insulin resistance. So as you can see, it's kind of all like a cascade effect. And then your GI and liver, which you're not going to know what this is, but your beta glucuronidase, if this is elevated, this means more risk for dysbiosis. And then the estrogen, like I'd mentioned, is recirculating your body because it's not being excreted through bowels. And then environmental, obviously, there's so many environmental toxins, the things that we put on our body, what we store our food in, the chemicals in the air, the fertilizer, the food that's covered in pesticides, all the things. This can slow down or like what's the word I'm looking for, can be overbearing on your detoxification system. So really focusing on making sure that you're minimizing all the things that you can with environmental toxins like xenoestrogens, like I said. So these things can be like plastic, especially cooking food in plastic. Highly recommend you get glass Tupperware ASAP. Anyways, let's get into insulin. Wait, I want to mention too that the reason that the personal care products and the xenoestrogens and things cause issues is because they bind to your estrogen receptors, so making estrogen increase even more and exacerbate the symptoms that are already there. This disrupts your detox enzymes for you to be able to properly detox. So that's why it is important to really make sure that you're focusing on all of these things. So let's get into the type of PCOSs and what we can do to help minimize these symptoms. So Wait, first I want to go into, I need to find this on my computer first. I want to go into, where did I do with that? I want to go into the, let's see, can't find it. Give me one quick second. I wanted to find the like symptom thing and go through the symptoms with you. So just give me 1 second so I can pull this up. Where is she? I don't know where she's at. Okay, there she is. Okay, so this is like your phenotype quiz. So section 1, and you can just mark off all that apply to you. So the section 1 is insulin resistant PCOS. So first one being, I have strong sugar or carb cravings, especially in the afternoon. I gain weight easily around my belly, even with exercise. I feel tired or sleepy after meals. I have darkened skin patches or skin tags. I've been told I have pre-diabetes or elevated insulin. My fasting insulin or glucose has been abnormal. I experience energy crashes or shakiness between meals. Blood work showed low SHBG or high free testosterone. My triglyceride to HDL ratio was greater than 2 on labs. So total up your section for that, and that will be section 1, insulin resistant PCOS. Now we're into section 2, which is post-pill PCOS. So you can check all that apply. My periods were regular before I started hormonal birth control. My PCOS symptoms began or worsened after stopping birth control. I had a long period of no periods after stopping the pill. I experienced acne flare-ups or hair loss after stopping the pill. I've taken the pill for over 3 years or started it in my teens. My SHBG is very low and androgens are elevated. I was diagnosed with PCOS within 6 to 12 months of stopping the pill. Last one, I had no symptoms of PCOS before birth control use. So total that up, and that will be for the post-pill PCOS phenotype. Next one, this is inflammatory PCOS, so check all that apply. I have bloating, gas, or digestive symptoms frequently. I had food sensitivities or histamine issues. Example, wine, avocados, aged cheese, things like that kind of make you have heart palpitations or just flare up, like your gut is sensitive to those. I've been diagnosed with IBS, leaky gut, or SIBO. I have joint pain, skin rashes, or eczema. I have had chronic fatigue or post-viral symptoms. My CRP or other inflammatory markers were elevated. I have autoimmune conditions or strong family history of them. I get acne or skin flares after eating certain foods. I've had recurrent yeast or urinary tract infections. Total for that section. Remember, that one's the inflammatory PCOS. Shoot, what just happened? They all just went out. Just went out again. All right, section 4. This is the last one. I am naturally lean but still have PCOS symptoms. I wake up in the middle of the night and can't fall back asleep. I feel wired but tired, especially in the evening. I experience anxiety, irritability, or restlessness often. I have been told I have quote unquote normal labs, but I still don't feel normal. My DHES was elevated, but testosterone was normal. I crash after stress or intense exercise. I can't handle fasting. It makes me jittery or dizzy. My cortisol or adrenal rhythm was abnormal on a Dutch or salivary test. So, total for that section, and then you can add all these up. Obviously, if section 1 was the highest scoring section, is likely your primary PCOS driver, but it's common to have like a secondary overlap, for example, insulin plus inflammatory. So identify your dominant one, and then that will kind of help lead you to where you need to start. So if your insulin resistant one was the most dominant, then you need to work on some blood sugar control. And so this is making sure that you're having a high fiber diet. And then other things you can do to support with supplement wise is myo-inositol, berberine. Berberine acts as the same thing as metformin. And then I would focus on a low glycemic diet. You can look up low glycemic foods, eliminate your added sugar and processed carbs, specifically things like pasta, bread, all the things. I would do a 12 to 14 hour overnight fast unless your adrenal one was your like secondary overlap. Then maybe don't do a 12 to 14 hour overnight fast. So 12 to 14 hour overnight fast would look like you eat dinner at 6 p.m. and then you don't eat again until 6 a.m. or 8 a.m. the next day. That's what I would do unless you have impaired adrenals. If that one was a little off, then you can do a little bit more of carbs closer to bed. And something I like is either a little oatmeal with almond butter or sweet potato with almond butter, something like that. That's going to be um, a high fiber, higher fat meal before bed to help calm you. And that can also help your blood sugar in the mornings, which sounds crazy, but it can. So like I would say hour, 2 hours before bed, could do that. That's specifically if adrenal thing is an issue. Now, getting into supplements for that, myo-inositol, 2,000 milligrams, berberine, 500 milligrams twice a day, magnesium glycinate, 300 to 600 milligrams, um, chromium, which you can just do the BQC supplement for this, but chromium, 200 to 600 milligrams, just depending. I would always start with the lowest dose, omega 3, up to 4,000 milligrams a day, and then NAC, 600 to 800 milligrams. Like I said, always start with the lowest, and NAC's going to help a lot with detoxification of liver as well. Excuse me. Okay, I don't know what happened, but it cut me off. But we're back and we're ready to go. Heading into the post PCOS or post pill PCOS, we'll want to make sure that we're still eating a high nutrient anti-inflammatory diet. Don't necessarily need to have macro restriction. Would focus a lot, like I mentioned, cruciferous vegetables, clean protein sources. I will put the anti-inflammatory guide in the show notes for you to have, and that'll help a lot whenever navigating how to eat an anti-inflammatory diet. So supplements to help with the post-pill PCOS: chasteberry 500 to 100 milligrams, inositol 2,000 milligrams, calcium D-glucarate 500 milligrams, methylated B vitamin, magnesium citrate, especially if you're dealing with constipation, would start with 300 milligrams. And you can work your way up to 400. And then a supplement that I really like to support liver is Liver by Revive. And I think honestly anybody who's getting off of birth control can benefit from Liver by Revive. And then getting into inflammatory PCOS, like we had mentioned, this is going to affect the gut. We want to identify any food sensitivities, eliminate any seed oils, excess of seed oils. So same here, want to focus on anti-inflammatory diet. Would remove gluten and dairy just for a period of time so that you can focus on healing the gut lining, which L-glutamine 5 to 10 grams a day will definitely do that for you. I like that and zinc carnosine mixed together. Doctor's Best brand can do 2 capsules of that. Works wonders. So we'll want to make sure that with inflammatory PCOS, we're working on gut integrity, so gut lining, and obviously focusing on immune system. And so you'll see within the supplements that you need to incorporate that a lot of them are going to support, obviously, just bringing down inflammation, and then the immune system as well. Omega 3, very good anti inflammatory, upwards to 4,000 milligrams a day. Curcumin, 500 to 1,000 milligrams a day. Quercetin, 500 milligrams. DAO enzyme, if you suspect that histamine, like you get reaction from leftovers, aged cheese, things like that. Foods high in histamine, avocado, you can look up high histamine foods and find out, oh wow, I am actually reacting to that. So DAO enzyme, just look per label. And then, like I'd mentioned, L-glutamine and then probiotic. You want to see if you to be greater than 10 billion. You really want it to have L. reuteri and L. rhamnosus. Those are the 2 strands of probiotic that you want inside of it. So just some cues to know, like, okay, what may be going on with you. With you while looking at abs, obviously insulin, glucose, fatigue, sugar cravings, always craving things. Supplements for this: inositol, berberine, like I said, doing a low glycemic index diet will help a lot with that. And then obviously making sure you're getting enough fiber. If you have acne, hair loss, you'll want to check your free testosterone, your DHEAS, DHEA sulfate. And then something you can do to help with this actually is zinc, saw palmetto, spearmint tea. If you suspect that estrogen dominance is a thing, and this is where you have heavy pain, heavy flow, breast pain, you can get Dutch, but also looking at your progesterone, estrogen, LH, FSH, and then to support if that's a thing. If estrogen is high in relative to progesterone, which I need to tell you the ratio on that, which I wrote it down. I don't know what I did with that. Anyways, we can come back to that. We can talk about that on another episode, but Actually, no, in my hormone handbook, which I'll also put in the show notes, you can see what exactly you need to do with that, or what your ratio is and how you can make changes on that. But DEM will help a lot, calcium D-glucarate. And then if you suspect adrenal imbalance, and this is maybe the symptoms you're getting is anxiety, a lot of anxiety, early waking in the night, I would get a Dutch test, which is going to see your cortisol throughout many times throughout the day, which is exactly what you need. And then you can, something to supplement with stress. Obviously, ashwagandha, magnesium are also great. And then obviously the inflammatory, like we mentioned, want to get a GI map to make sure to rule out any underlying GI issues going on. But if you've been diagnosed with IBS, this is usually, I've mentioned this before, likely something else going on inside of your gut. If you have histamine intolerance, like we just mentioned, obviously glutamine is something that we want to do as well. But something that you should also be aware of is, okay, when, like, let me map out my PCOS timeline. When did I start having heavy irregular cycles? Has it always been like this since I started my period? When did I get acne? When did this fatigue start? When did I start to develop GI issues? Did I start birth control at an early age? How long was I on birth control? You know, how did my body respond while taking birth control and while getting off birth control? Any traumas in life, shift work, maybe you work third shift, night shift, maybe you've overtrained your whole life, history of miscarriages or chronic antibiotic use or steroid use, all of these things can alter your body and how your body responds. So, the last thing that I want to mention, what was the last thing that I want to mention? I don't remember. I think that's it. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. As always, I'm going to leave some things for you to, some free resources for you. But if you have anything that you would have questions on, you can always shoot me a DM on Instagram. You can email me, helpwithhads@gmail.com. Lots of things you can do. And check out my resources. And if you need more accountability, more help with these things, then you can reach out to me, like I said, and we can schedule a free call and I can see how I can help you, coach you, whatever you need to make these things better for you. But I think that's all. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next episode.